Good evening. This is Talk Back. I'm Sheila, and tonight we have a very special program. We have two guests that are with me who are involved in a project that I'm so happy to be involved in also, from Safe Futures. Everybody knows that Safe Futures is the premier agency in our community in southeastern Connecticut that advocates for prevention and help to families, men, women, and children with battered domestic violence issues, sexual assault, and harassment issues. And so let's introduce our guests. First we have Christine Foster. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. I'm glad you're here. Christine is the Associate Director of Counseling and Camp Hope, which is what we're going to talk about. That's the special thing we're going to talk about for Safe Futures, right?
Correct.
Okay, and we also have Karen Rosenberg. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
And Karen with me, proudly, the two of us are the co-chair of the Safe Futures Camp Hope Committee.
Right.
And we've just put out a press release that we're going to talk about. And our job today is to let the public know what is happening with this special program called Camp Hope. So let's start with you, Christine. What is Camp Hope?
Camp Hope is a research-based camping program for children who have been exposed to domestic violence. Oftentimes, children are seen as secondary victims of domestic violence or family violence, but the truth is they're at very critical developmental stages, and just even being exposed to family violence and abuse can have very significant negative impacts on their development and on their future. Children who have been exposed to domestic violence are at a higher risk of developing anxiety, depression, substance abuse problems as an adult, and becoming involved in the criminal justice themselves, either as a victim or a perpetrator of violence.
So it's really important that you mention that, because people should know if a child is a bystander, watches, observes, isn't even involved in the actual physical event, but observes serious domestic violence and assault issues in their homes, in their community, that can have the same adverse effects as if they themselves were a direct victim, right?
Absolutely.
I think people should really know that just being a bystander is pretty bad in and of itself, okay? So Camp Hope was developed to do what for these kids?
So Camp Hope was developed to mitigate some of the risks associated with that exposure. The curriculum is based on research around hope, which shows that hope increases belief in themselves, in others, and in their dreams, and can help them create brighter futures. So they go to camp and learn about how to find different pathways towards their goals. So if things don't go the way that you expect it to the first time, you don't just give up, you look for another way. They also have an opportunity to see that they are not alone in their experiences. Oftentimes, family violence can be very isolating, and children may internalize negative thoughts that lead them to believe that it's their fault or that they're somehow responsible for what's happening. And so connecting with other children who have similar experiences can really help to change their view of themselves and their future.
So this is the first time that Safe Futures is going to work on getting kids exposed to the domestic violence to a camp situation in the summer, right? All right, we're going to learn much more about how it works, but first I want to turn to Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
So you and I are volunteers for Safe Futures and have been for some time. Why did you get involved in this program?
Well, first, it's why I got involved with Safe Futures. I knew that when I retired that I wanted to do some sort of important volunteer work, and I'd always thought that victims of domestic violence is where I wanted to put my energy, because everybody knows someone, a relative, a friend, a neighbor, someone you work with. Themselves, true, who is a victim of domestic violence. And I worked with kids in my profession, and
Your profession was?
I was head of a small elementary school, and I had kids who I knew were coming from uncomfortable situations and coming into school. And most of my students were privileged, and still, it has no boundaries.
Absolutely. People should understand that. It hits every socioeconomic level of income, race, culture. It hits everyone.
when I first heard about this camp, I was at a meeting at Safe Futures and they were talking about the camp, and I thought, this is something important. This is something really special. Getting these kids out of their houses for a while into a more open environment was so important. So I was really honored to be given this position and to work with Christine.
Okay,
And you.
Yeah, and so we're both of us, Karen and I, are proud to be co-chairs of the Camp Hope Committee of Safe Futures, and we're working on a press release and trying to get the word out. And this is one way to get the word out. And before we get into more of the details, I think we have a video that can help show people what it's about a little bit. Okay, can we put the video on now? Here we go.
Hi, I'm Casey Gwynn, the founder of Camp Hope America. For the next few minutes, we want to tell you the story of Camp Hope. Camp Hope is the first camp in the United States focused on children impacted by child abuse and domestic violence. Our goal at Camp Hope is not just to give children their childhood back, but it's to give them a pathway to hope. Because trauma-exposed children so often end up in the state prisons of this country as they grow up. And so often they repeat the generational cycle down through the years. Camp Hope's goal is to break that cycle and to give children a pathway to hope.
Just because knowing that you're around other people that care about you is the best feeling in the world.
I can taste this, the fear that love alone erases. So I'm back to the basics. I figure it's time I face this. Time to take my own advice. Love alone is worth the fight. Love alone is worth the fight. Thought I'd come to this, but it seems like I'm finally feeling numb to this. The funny thing about a name is you forget what the reason you were playing the game is. And it's all an illusion, a 21st century institution. So I'm headed down the open road unknown. And we find what we're made of through the open door. For the rhyme and reason. Are you born while you leaving? What you fearing, what you believing? Why you living and breathing? Why you fighting it and getting it even? Let's go headed down the open road unknown. And we find what we're made of through the open door. Is it fear you're afraid of?
Hope is something you can hold on to when you're feeling down or sad. It's never going to leave you. It's always right there next to you.
Kids who have experienced healing go out and heal other people, and that's why this matters. It matters a lot.
We need you to help us change the ending for these children. You can love these kids at 10 or 12 or 14, or you can lock them up at 17 or 18 and say you're tough on crime. Will you invest in hope? Will you help break the generational cycle of abuse? We need you to be hope givers.
Okay, great. That was a great video.
It was wonderful.
It was wonderful. So you can see from the credits that this is something that's it's getting nationwide. It's just coming to Connecticut. And Karen, you and I did a little research in writing our release about this Casey Gwynn. Tell us about him.
So Casey Gwynn was tell you in a minute. Casey Gwynn was the president of Alliance for Hope International. And he was involved in the development of programs and so on, but he felt that the kids needed more, that they needed to have something to look forward to, something that they would enjoy, something that would not take them back all the time into their home. And he and his wife started looking around the San Diego area for camp. And eventually they found a piece of property and they began the first Camp Hope America. It was their idea to bring hope and pathways and enjoyment to these kids.
And I like the goal that they express is to give the kids back to childhoods that sometimes they miss because of all the trauma they experience. So he was the one that was featured in that film. He introduced it, he came in at the end, and he's responsible for really starting this whole movement. So now it's come to Connecticut. So tell us, Chris, how are we working it? Where is Camp Hope in Connecticut, and how are we going to do it?
So the first Camp Hope in Connecticut is operated by the Bridgeport Center for Family Justice. And so last summer, I had the opportunity to go with them to camp to see how it runs, to really experience the whole camping environment, which was really amazing. And then this summer, we have partnered with the Channel 3 Kids Camp, which is in Andover, to bring 24 children between the ages of 7 and 11 to camp there. So they'll have an opportunity to participate in traditional camping experiences like rope courses, archery, swimming, arts and crafts, all
the
of
usual
those
things you do at camp.
Exactly, all of those fun, challenging things, but also to participate in the Camp Hope curriculum, which highlights stories of hope heroes that show people who have been through similar experiences and how they've overcome that adversity, and to give them examples of how we can believe in each other and encourage each other.
So when they're at Camp Hope, they'll have the normal camp experiences, that the archery and the swimming and so forth that they showed in the film, but there's also going to be some therapeutic help. How will that come? Will it be in the form of discussion groups or panel discussions?
So
will there be one-on-one kind of interviews with kids? How will that work?
So there are a few different ways that we incorporate the Camp Hope curriculum. During cabin time, they'll have more intimate, smaller group discussions with their cabin mates. And then we also have hook activities, which are just fun activities that sort of reinforce the principles that we've been talking about throughout the week. And we also have a nightly campfire time, which is when we read the Hope stories and talk as a larger group, the whole kind of Camp Hope community, to discuss ways that you can find hope in your daily lives.
So this is a one-week program. They're taken away from their homes in Connecticut and sent to the Andover camp. So Karen, when you were teaching and you saw kids that may have been affected in homes that had serious problems, did you wish there were more resources in the area that you could rely upon to refer them to or to suggest to families that they take advantage of?
I was lucky that my school was in New London, and New London has a really good social work effort, and I had a fabulous social worker in my school, and she would get so frustrated that she couldn't do more. And it's because these kind of programs didn't exist yet. And many of our parents were not ready to accept that their children might have an issue, that the things that they see and so on. It's not that I had a lot of children in this situation, but when it did come up, it was very concerning for us that we could do so little about it. As Safe Future has grown, they've become so much more involved with the children of these families, And I think that's so important.
Okay, so we're going to have 24, this summer, starting this summer, we're going to have 24 kids from ages 7 to 11. And how are they going to be selected? Where are they coming from?
So these are all children who are part of families that our agency already works with. So those referrals come from the police, they may come from schools, from medical providers, sometimes even just word of mouth. So any family that's experiencing domestic violence that has come to Safe Futures for services. And then there's a brief screening process just to make sure that the child and the parent are both ready for camp. It can be a lot to be away from your parent for a week, especially if you never have been before, and if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety. So we do have to make sure that they're ready for that experience.
Will the kids know when they're selected for this 1 week experience, will they know that they're going to be in a special place, or are they approached with the idea that you're just going to summer camp the way your next door neighbor goes to summer camp? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How is that going to work?
So we do talk to them about what it is. We talk about just coming to camp, but we also talk about the importance of hope and about how we're building a community, because the Camp Hope is more than just a summer camp. It's a community, and it's really important for these kids to stay connected with each other. So they're also involved in activities throughout the year. So we talk about that as well.
So are they going to meet one another before they start the camp experience?
Yes.
Okay, so they're going to be receptions or get-togethers between families and Safe Futures?
Yeah, so we have other children's programming that we provide that many of the kids may also be involved in. So some of them might know each other already. And we do have a pre-camp meeting about a month before camp where we bring all of the families together.
Okay, that's great. And then after camp, will these kids be able to go to camp next year and following years, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, ideally, again, our goal is to build a strong Camp Hope community, and so ideally we would love for children that come to camp this year to return to camp next year, and if they're still in our community, they would certainly be invited to do so.
And then it's important to notice from the video and from what we've read about, there are measures and criteria for evaluating what these kids are doing and how they are relating to each other and to the camp experience. Tell us a little bit about that. What is the scientific research behind this program?
So there are two main ways that Camp Hope measures outcomes in the children that go to camp. One of them are through Hope Indexes. So it's a short survey that children complete before they go to camp, while they're at camp, and later when they leave camp. And that's to give us an idea of how effective the program is. And so far research has shown that it is. Kids are leaving camp with a much greater sense of hope, with a higher belief in themselves and in their future, and with more perseverance to really stick to their goals.
Right. But of course, we're just starting it here in Connecticut, or in southeastern Connecticut, so we won't yet have the research about whether that sense of perseverance and resilience will continue if they go back into their homes and communities and face similar trauma, right?
Right.
You need to measure that over time.
Absolutely. And that is, again, why the sense of community, and we call it a Pathways program, is so important. So we bring them back together once a month after camp in order to help keep that hope high and to remind them that there are people here that believe in you and that you have value in this community. And it really gives them an opportunity to just reconnect and again, to remind them of all of those things they learned at camp.
I thought that was such an important thing when we first heard that they would have this programming, that it's scheduled in advance, that you know that you'll be bringing them in. I thought that was so important.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, so now let's talk about the mechanics of, so they're going to be chosen by filtering through the various counseling programs that you have at Safe Futures or other agencies in our area that do that kind of work? Trying to get those 24 kids, selecting them?
If we don't have enough campers to fill all of the spots, we do have community partners that we can reach out to for referrals as well.
All right. And are there any other camps in the state of Connecticut that are already in operation, or is this going to be the first experience for Connecticut?
So again, the Center for Family Justice in Bridgeport operates
They
Camp
have a
Hope.
camp too? Okay.
Yeah, their camp is actually, it's run out in Massachusetts, but it's children from their region, the Bridgeport region, that attend camp. So we'll be the second Camp Hope site
okay,
in
great.
Connecticut.
And as we saw from the video, it's spreading all around the country to
Yes.
the various areas. And what about the costs for this? How are they being defrayed?
So it costs about $1,000 to send a camper to camp, and that includes the fee for camp as well as the trunk and any supplies that they need. So far, we have received some funding from the Chamber of Commerce for supplies. We received a Verizon Readiness Grant from Verizon, and we're still seeking other grant and private donations as well.
And as someone who's involved in Safe Futures, the Rose Conrad Memorial Fund, which I founded as a result of a client of mine being murdered by her husband, that's part of Safe Futures. So we're pledged to sponsor one child per season. So that's one help to defray some of the costs of the camp. But we are looking for donations from the public as well as from grants and other community organizations.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Right, so that makes sense. So Karen, what do you think is how are parents going to react, or should they react to this? Because I can see some parents maybe not wanting their children to go, and how are they going to?
Well, I think the fact that these children are already receiving services, that the parents are open enough that they're allowing the children to have the services. And when I know in general, any child who receives services must have permission from their parents. So I think that they will be anxious and nervous because sometimes they're very dependent on their children, and that sort of keeps them under control. And I think they will be anxious, but I know I was anxious the first time I sent my son to camp. So I think that's okay. But I think that they will be very open to this.
And will there be opportunities for the parents and the rest of us to visit the camp before the season starts? What weeks are they going to be going, by the way?
So we're going to be going the third week of June. It's the 21st through the 26th. We won't be visiting camp before the week of camp with the families, but we are trying to organize a family day later on, maybe in the fall, where the kids can come to camp for a day with their families and really show them like what they learned at camp and what they experienced, and kind of really invite their parents into that community with them.
And will there be when the kid comes back from the camp, and yes, there are opportunities to meet their fellow campers and have some kinds of receptions or get-togethers, will there be a therapeutic session with a kid as part of their normal counseling to figure out how the camp went and how it's integrated into their ongoing treatment and so forth?
So we do some follow-up surveys and conversations, but as far as counseling goes, it really depends on the individual child and their needs. So if they're already in counseling, we would certainly continue that.
Okay. They talked about the certain scale and measurements in the video. Can you explain what that is? If you have a number 6 or higher, it's a more danger zone. Explain that, because I think people should know how we measure some of the trauma that these kids have.
So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it's a questionnaire that's administered. For our purposes, we only administer it to children over the age of 11, but it asks questions about their experiences with family violence. Have they had a loss of a parent or a close loved one? If they've experienced any sexual, physical, or emotional abuse, any kind of neglect. So different types of experiences that may occur in childhood. And on average, children in America score around a 1.6 on that. But kids who attend Camp Hope, typically their scores are 4 or higher. And when you have a score that high, your chances of having negative outcomes into adulthood are much greater.
Okay. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, you said that this survey is only for children 11 and older, correct?
Correct.
So is there any kind of survey that you'll be doing with the younger children?
So with the younger children, we do the Hope Index to measure their level of hope. We don't do the ACEs survey until they're older. So we call the older group 11 to 17-year-olds high adventure campers, and we won't be working with that age group this summer, but our goal is to incorporate them in later summers.
So that ACE index is then kids from 11 on, and the 7 to 11, the Hope Index. So you are doing, obviously, in getting these campers and selecting them, you're doing some analysis and interpretation of their issues. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
during the screening process, we talk to the parents, to the child, and if they have any counseling or therapeutic services, we'll often reach out to their counselor to get information about their history, about any behavior problems or struggles they might currently be experiencing, just to evaluate their readiness for camp.
And at the camp, they'll have the regular bunk counselors, but will there be counselors that are trained specifically to deal with these issues?
Yes, so we've partnered with Channel 3 Kids Camp, and so each cabin will have one of their counselors and one Camp Hope counselor. And we're going to do a lot of training with our Camp Hope counselors, but we also do some joint training with the counselors together so that both counselors have a really solid foundation in trauma-informed practices, in behaviors that are common in children who have experienced trauma, and things like that.
Okay.
All
right.
I have a question about the counselors. I know that it's often better to have counselors who are younger, and because they can relate more to the children, or even more important, the children can relate to them. So will these counselors be, how old?
Yeah, so we're looking for counselors between the ages of 18 and 24. We have been recruiting from some local high schools as well as some local colleges. And anyone that is interested in being a counselor for Camp Hope can email me or call Safe Futures and just ask for Christine Foster.
What's the telephone number, Safe Futures? We can put that up.
Oh yeah, it's 860-447-0366.
Okay, 860-447-0366 if anyone's interested in applying for counsel or learning more about this program.
Yeah,
participating with it or helping it in some way. All right, this has been great. Do you have any final thoughts on the program? How would you summarize it? We've got about a minute.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, we're really excited about bringing this program to fruition. I think that it's a service that has long been needed. I think in terms of helping children to overcome the adversities in their life and also just preventing future violence from happening.
Okay. So this has been great. Thank you, Christine, and thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
And you and Karen and I are glad to be on the committee working to publicize this and telling people about it. And of course, I hope you will learn more about Camp Hope, learn more about Safe Futures, and understand that millions of kids in this country today are either direct victims or bystanders of sexual violence, domestic violence, and it's a tremendously serious problem because it affects their futures. And this camp will help. It will help. And thank you for watching. See you next week on Talkback. Good night.